Aloha mai kako, everyone. Welcome to the Moana Nui podcast. We are in week 3 of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Month. Today, we are excited to bring you another great panel to have some challenging but much needed discussions around the topics of appropriation and appreciation of our different diverse cultures around the world. My name is Moana. I am the founder and host of the Moana Nui podcast, the author of The Adventures of Nakoa and Nohea children's book series, editor for the Wildcard Chronicles, publisher here at Burning Spear Comics, and champion and advocate for our AANHPI community and many marginalized communities around the world. As always, tonight I'm joined by my wonderful sis, Dana.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm very excited about today's panel, but before I get started, let me introduce myself to those that may or may not know me. I am Dana. I am a cosplay, event, and con staff photographer. You've probably seen some of my photos with Dragon Con, MomoCon, MA Week in Atlanta, and even featured with DC Comics. I'm also a voice actor, an event planner, and a whole lot more. And now I'm going to hand it back over to my beautiful co-host, the lovely Moana.
You in those hands. So tonight, our guest moderator, as we always do with these panels, we love to share our platform with other movers and shakers within our community. So tonight, we are joined by Havana Wynn, and she does some amazing work with Dragon Con and so many other events. And she also has her own creative business as well. She's a UX designer. And please go check out her comic book, Kamikaze, Amazing Story.
Yes,
So we are
amazing.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much, Moana. Thank you so much, Dana. It's always a pleasure to be here. Yes, I'm Havana Wynn. I'm the lead character artist on a graphic novel series called Kamikaze. I'm also a UX designer. I'm an activist. I'm an advocate. But today, I will be your moderator. I am just so excited about tonight's panel. Tonight's panel is going to be discussing what's the difference between appreciation and appropriation. We've got some killer questions tonight, and I can't wait for you all to meet our wonderful speakers. Wonderful. So we have a full night, and I want to go ahead and just quickly introduce our speakers for tonight. Let's start with John. Can we get a quick intro on who you are?
So I kind of have to warm up my voice because I haven't been talking as I was on the airplane. Just landed on Boston Logan Airport where I reside. I grew up in Orange County. So to make this short, about 2 weeks ago, I was able to, share my life journey on this beautiful cast. And I think I spoke a little too much. So I'm here to just kind of listen at the same time, share my little opinions and 2 cents, at the same time learn about, appreciation, appropriation. And then Havana's brought this great energy along with this Moana and Dana. So here I am joining once again. Yeah, pleasure meeting you guys.
Thank you, John. V, why don't you go next?
I am Visha Pawahi Souza. Most people call me V. I am a former addiction medicine worker, I guess you would say, and I'm an advocate for mental health for the Kanaka Maoli community. Starting my PhD program at UBC Vancouver in September, where I will be studying and developing a theory that deals with the Native Hawaiians and mental health in the diaspora. So that's me currently.
Ooh.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you, Moana. As always, I've been a little frequent panelist here lately, and just glad to be here with everybody on this panel. I'm pretty excited about the topic, so thank you.
Thank you. Kanoi, how about you?
Good job. Aloha mai kako. Aloha. My name is Kanoi Lani Davis. I come from the islands of Molokai here in Hawaii. I have a lot of hats. I'm not quite sure where to start. more so an advocate for natural resources, preserving natural resources, inclusive of culture, inclusive of our Ike Kupuna, which is the thoughts, the knowledge of our ancestors. I guess I'm an activist. If I had to have a label, stood on many front lines, and will continue to do so along with my children, as long as it's for what is right for our people, for our culture, for our natural resources. Aside from that, I work with the University of Hawaii Department of Psychiatry. I have a program called Punikiola, where it is culture as health, and more towards less academic and more towards the culture, making sure that it stays within this Indigenous mindset to teach our children self-identity. And it's based through substance use and abuse intervention and prevention. I'm also a business owner. I have my business. It's called Pomahina Designs, in which we do wearable arts. And the whole idea of that was based off of education, to remember the names and the elements to which we honored for generations, and we kind of maybe never forgot the elements, but we forgot their names. And so reviving that is very, very important to me. I also have another business. It's called Mana Bombs LLC. We do podcasts as well, and our focus is well-being, of course, through a perspective of Ho'amana, which is a practice of healing that's really, really old, that has just recently been revived. And I think that's it. That's me in a nutshell. And mahalo Moana for inviting me, and it's beautiful to see each and every one of you.
He does it all. Kamaka Kahau, can we have you next?
Good job. Ai, mahalo. Aloha nui kako. Welcome to everybody. It is a true honor to be here. Mahalo to Moana. And so I am a locally known Hawaiian falsetto, or traditional Hawaiian falsetto music individual, and an educator, and just kind of sharing and connecting people through what I've learned from Hawaii, and sharing the stories through music.
Love it. And then last but not least, Jason Chu.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Yeah, hello to everybody, and thank you, of course, to Moana and Havana for hosting and everything. My name is Jason Chu. I'm an Asian American, Chinese American hip hop artist and activist based in Los Angeles, California. I work closely with Hate is a Virus, which is a movement of mobilizers and amplifiers in the AAPI community to combat racism and hatred. And I just released a project, Face Value, that's all about Asian American history, and drawing from sort of this historical resilience, strength, and foundation to address, topics in our generation and times. But yeah, I'm super excited about this topic in particular, because I think it's one that is A, both very urgent and crucial, and also B, something that's very misunderstood. I feel like a lot of people call things appropriation that are not. And also a lot of people are not aware of why it's so damaging and why it's so deep. So I'm very excited for this, and it's a pleasure to be with y'all.
Lovely. And actually, I was mistaken. Jason wasn't the last. Moana, I'm so used to you being the boss lady. Do you want to do just a quick introduction?
No, I mean, everybody knows me. I'm the founder of the podcast. I am the champion of this wonderful community that I'm blessed and honored to be a part of. I love my people and, the wonderful cultures that I grew up in parallel with. So I'm super excited to have this panel here with us. And I'm grateful to all of you for offering your voice and being open to these conversations that not everyone is willing to have. So.
Amazing. Thank you all for joining. Well, as I said, audience, we have a full slate of questions today. And given the audience of this podcast and the speakers, we can all agree, yes, cultural appropriation bad. My goal tonight is to kind of elevate that discussion and really dive into the gray area that even other BIPOC, women, other progressives have questions about. So I'm excited. And I mean, let's go ahead and dive in. With our first question, I wanted to kind of touch on the themes of like, what's the big deal with cultural appropriation? What's the harm, right? It's just clothing, it's just food, right? So one of the reasons why a cultural appropriation is harmful is it can lead to cultural erasure. What are your thoughts on this? What are examples of this? Kamaka, you want to go first?
I agree with John kind of pull that, but I'm here really to learn. I mean, growing up in Hawaii for me is I never really had an opportunity to really dive and pay attention to a lot of these things, because for me, and my understanding, it's in Hawaiian we just say ao and oya, lako, mako, which is myself, that person, all of us inclusively. So I don't know. This is a very new thing, but I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is the most recent social media rant that went on, where there were these two women who decided to do a little ceremony, and the ceremony, they had a powwow drum. They were outdoors, and they decided to use this word, which we know as ho'oponopono, which means to make right. With your family, friends, wherever it may be, but as a language speaker, of course, that really makes you like, oh gosh, okay, wait, hold on, it's not ho'oponopono. We start going in, like just drilling on, because as you say, the erasure of the culture, people will hear this and they think, oh, this is the way it's supposed to be. And you really lose sight of the authenticity of the actual culture. So that's what I have.
Yeah, and I can back that up. So when I think about like cultural awareness or cultural eraser, my problem that I have, I live in the Midwest. I've been here for the majority of my life, even though my family is from Kailua on Oahu. So the problem I have here, and that I have always had, was how luau's are portrayed. Not only that, the leis that hang in the cars, to me, it just doesn't sit right with me. So for all the people that know me here, people who know me through social media, I'm pretty militant in my ideologies when it comes to the misappropriation of Hawaii. And so, yeah, I will always correct people, especially here. I'm not a fan of corporations who take, spirit weeks and take luau's or whatever they want to call them. The previous corporation I worked for, or the organization I worked for, I went head to head with the HR person and was like, I think it's offensive. As long as I'm here, I better not see it again. And they didn't after that. They changed the name to it, but it was like Traveler's Day, so you can travel anywhere. It doesn't have to just be a Tiki Tuesday or whatever they wanted to call it. So yeah, for me, it's just how, luau's are portrayed, what leis mean to us, and the Snapchat filters for the lei po'o, and that's another thing that I really stress on too. I'm like, that is cultural appropriation. I know that Snapchat thinks it's fun, but for us, it's not. It's a mockery. So when you do stuff like that, you're mocking my culture. You're not showing appreciation for it because you have no idea what any of that stuff means. Even in giving a lei, there's always a purpose for giving that lei or receiving that lei. And people don't understand that. They just think they get to come to Hawaii and they get laid, and they have their little slogans that they say, "Ooh, I got laid in Hawaii," which probably was a slogan that was made for economic reasons, for the travel industry to propel, the economy in Hawaii. And so, yeah, all of it is pretty problematic. And so, yeah, I'm one of those people who will continue to express my disdain for inappropriate uses of anything that has to deal with Hawaii. just so that our culture does not become something that is only going to be seen in a museum one day, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up. It does touch on the next question, which is like, I think cultural appropriation, it does distort the original intent. So I love that you brought up the examples of leis and luau's, and like I know again, like it's harmful because it erases and it distorts the original intention. Like, and I guess one example that comes off the top of my mind is the word namaste, which I know is not the right way to say it, but it means hello. But we say it as like a blessing or something at the end. And so my question to all of y'all is, there's obviously a lot of people say like there's natural cultural evolution, but then there's also cultural appropriation. For you, like where is that line, and when does it like cross over? I know that's not a very simple question.
I just wanted to share that we had just done a podcast as well. We looked up the word appropriation, right? It's the misuse and taking parts of another person's culture, and usually you're just taking the good parts of it. You're not taking the totality of it. And I really believe when we talk about this movement of erasure, the possibility of erasure, we really need to take that seriously. And when we talk about evolution, we have to think, what is evolution? And like anything that evolves or has evolution also comes with work. It comes with research. It comes with study. It comes with sacrifice. It comes with experience. It comes with so many other things. As in the same sentence, you could also say a lot of the work that we have put in as Kanaka, as Hawaiians. I'm going to only speak obviously for the Hawaiian side of me. And I'm Hawaiian, Chinese, Filipino, by the way. So, and I grew up Hawaiian and Chinese. So this part of me is, there's been sacrifices. And we're not talking in the 43 years of my life. I'm talking in my grandparents, who I learned from, who they learned from, and who they learned from, and all the trials and tribulations that came up into this moment to create this experience for me. So even if we evolve, all we're evolving is ourselves. The traditions are there. That's your foundation. So if you don't have a relationship or a connection to the tradition, then the evolution is not one of true evolution. All it is you're just making it, you're just taking all the good love and light, good stuff of things, and you're making it into really what it ends up coming up down to is you're taking from somebody else, which means you're actually stealing. So for your benefit as you grow, because you're trying to heal and take for yourself, how many people did you have to push down to get that? And really, is it full? Is it whole? Is it evolved? So I think that's where we come to is it's not evolution in my mind.
Right. No, well said. Anyone have other thoughts on the distortion of like original meanings when we do appropriate parts of culture?
Well, so I think that the part that's problematic for me is, especially when it comes to Hawaiian culture, in terms of like books that are written about our history and our culture, you have to be very careful about who is the author, what is their connection into the history. Are they writing this book to simply sell a book and use Hawaiian culture as a draw and an attraction for that economic gain, and it's simply their thoughts on it? Or is it someone who has been embedded in the community, whether they're Native Hawaiian or not? And do they truly want to show the culture, honor the culture, celebrate the people, talk about the important figures within our history that have, played a role, whether they were Native Hawaiian, whether they were part of the African American Ohana, who are part of our history? A lot of people don't even understand that part. So it's critical to understand that, because if you're looking at the wrong source, they can totally distort, especially for people who have not been to Hawaii, who do not understand it, right? So somebody who's picking it up as an early learner to Hawaiian culture, it's really important for you to be diligent about the sources that you pick, because if it's the wrong one, then you're learning a whole wrong part of history, and it becomes even more offensive when you try to connect with people who are native or who are of a given culture, whether it be Hawaiian or another one. And the thing that comes to mind for me is like, when people try to speak to me about Hawaii, they hear that I'm from Hawaii, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I went on this trip to, like I was in Maui, or I was stationed somewhere," and they automatically like it's that. And I'm thinking to myself like, "Oh, I'm so mahalo that you had your great vacation, but like there's so much more than Hawaii. Like, do you know anything about the people who are there? Did you even take the attempt to understand the culture besides you taking from it? Oh, I'm here, look, Snapchat, take all my pictures. I got, like I'm over here endangering myself, right? Like going to these beautiful things that you see on the internet." And Kanoi touched on this, in her podcast last week about like sucking up resources from the community in a way you're not thinking about. Because if you go out to this place that you think is beautiful, but it's like off the beaten path and you get hurt, this one drives me insane, because our first response rescuers have to go and help you and risk their own lives for your ignorance and your exploitation of our land, right? So it's a long way to say, like, I could go off on this, but let me myself.
Very fascinating. And V, I see that you had a very you had a reaction to what she said. What's on your mind?
I do. I have all kind of reactions. First, I stan Kamaka. Like I've stan Kamaka since I seen him on the sing along for OEVA. So just like knowing a little bit about what I've read about Kamaka and his story, it kind of reminds me of the appreciation that he continues to show to our culture, all the way down to even learning our language. So when I think about like tourists, I am not a fan of a tourist. Like I'm not. And again, I do not hesitate to say that to the people that I know, especially when they talk about, oh, I've been to Hawaii, I cringe, or if they say, oh yeah, I'm going to Hawaii in June, or I'm going to Hawaii in July, like I cringe and I'll tell them, what is your purpose? Because if your purpose is just to go to the beach and frolic and play, you're actually causing my people harm. You're not doing anything for the Lahui. And so it blows their mind that I'm talking to them like that, but that's exactly how I feel. I'll say I can give you places for you to go visit. If you go learn something, then by all means, go visit. But if you're just going there, you're not showing any kind of respect to my people. You're not showing any kind of appreciation for our culture, nor are you trying to preserve it, especially when people tell me they are moving to Hawaii. Oh, my husband's military, moving to Hawaii. I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not the best person to talk to about that. And again, I don't hesitate to say that. I say it from like, I mean, well, like I love people. I do. I want people to come visit Hawaii. I want them to like learn about us. I want that. But do it in a respectful manner. And by all means, if you know somebody there, let them show you. I invite my friends all the time with me. Like, if you want to go, I will show you. I will go to the Iolani Palace 30,000 times if I have to with all my friends. I don't mind that, as long as you're learning something. But if you're going there and you're not preserving our culture, some of the Kia'i I met when I was on Mauna Kea, they were not, they're not from Hawaii, but they practice all of our traditions. They, spoke Hawaiian. They know how to cultivate the land. They dance hula, and it was just like, okay, you can be up here with us because you're an ally to my people. I see that you're preserving us. But if you're not going to preserve us, I don't want you there. So that's what Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that this is the super important thing to talk about with appropriation, right? There's two points here. The first is, if you don't care about people, cultural appropriation doesn't matter, right? This is because cultural appropriation is not something that's enforced by definition, right? It comes about because of a power dynamic, because of an imbalance in power dynamic, and usually because of historical inequity and injustice. And I think that so the first point is, if you don't care about that, if you don't care, then fine, like that's cool, but then you the ops. You know what I'm saying? Like there are people in this world who just don't care about others, and we can't force them to care about cultural appropriation. So the first step in this appropriation conversation is acknowledging that if we're participating in it, it's out of care for others. Right? It's not out of fear of being canceled. It's not out of, oh, if I don't do this, you know, like it's going to lead to, it's because we care about people. Then the second step is that I think if we agree that people care about people and we're trying to not harm people, then helping people understand why appropriation is harmful, right? Because I think that that's something that the conversation around appropriation has become one sort of driven by fear, right? Like, oh, I don't want to be canceled. Oh, I don't want, you know, like to do something that looks bad on me. And so much of the conversation around appropriation centers around the appropriator rather than the root culture. Right. And I think we need to recenter that, as we have been, as everybody who's spoken up has. We need to recenter conversations of appropriation around the people who are being harmed. And people say, oh, you're being offended. It's not offense. It's actually harm. And yes, I'm offended that I'm being harmed, or I'm offended that Native Hawaiians are being harmed, or I'm offended that Black folks are being harmed. But it's not just about, this is not something I like. Right. And I think that that's something that I'm hearing from all of the Hawaiian folks that have spoken, is that it's not about, oh, we don't want you here, or, oh, we don't think that, you know, it's cool that you like our stuff. It's so much deeper than that. It's you liking our stuff in the way that you've chosen to, or in the way that you're used to, brings material harm to our communities. It brings disenfranchisement to our industries. It brings erasure of our cultures. And all of those are things that we can dive into deeper and talk about how does that happen, right? So, for example, for Asian American cultures, right? So Chinese American, as I am, when, for example, right, a new white-owned or a new non-Asian owned restaurant opens up and says, hey, you know, we're like Chinese food, but better because it's not greasy and it's not bad for you. That causes material harm to our cultures insofar as it perpetuates anti-Asian bias, right? This stereotype of, oh, Asians are dirty and this and that. And it also perpetuates economic damage insofar as it actively drives consumers away from mom and pop restaurants, away from restaurants that deserve that traffic, because not only, and I'm not somebody, so another thing that I'll put out, and this may be controversial and I'm okay talking about it, I'm not somebody who says, just because I was here first, I'm the only one who can do it. Right? If that's what the cultural appropriation conversation is, hey, you can't do this because this is, because I did my great grandfather did kung fu first before you knew about it. Like, that's not a good reason to say somebody can't do something, because what that does is it actually prevents cultural evolution, to use that word, right? It prevents growth and it prevents new communities springing up and forming. And we don't want, I don't want to become regressive. Right? I don't want to say, hey, you know, what Kung Fu was in 1875 is what it should always be. And if you try to make it something new, that's bad. Because again, right, that's centering the conversation around fear. But I do want to say, hey, you know, Chinatown elders who may have been practicing Tai Chi for their whole life, like, they get kicked out of parks, or the parks get closed on them, or they don't get spaces and community centers. Whereas, you know, white-owned businesses that promote like holistic health get prime real estate, and landowners will sign them to better deals, and banks will give them loans, business loans for rent. Right? So I think we got to be very careful to not talk about it just in a sense of regressive, you don't look like you belong, so you can't be a part of this. But we do have to make it this calling in, right? Are you coming into this culture, or are you just skimming off the top and not actually participating in a deeper way?
Oh, I love that. Yes, so many things that you mentioned that I think we could talk for hours on. John, do you have a reaction or a response to what has been discussed?
Sorry, excuse me. I haven't been talking, so I gotta warm up my voice before I actually say
You're
something.
totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of as you guys, I was just kind of hearing out. I was just kind of, I feel like someone's got a hammer to hit me because I'm also learning a lot in that aspect. Because just again, me once again, me actually born and raised in Korea, coming into America. A lot of people, even in California, have dreams about Hawaii. Because a lot of my friends growing up were Samoans, and then, oh, you gotta come to Hawaii, you gotta come to my island. All the tattoos that we, we have different culture. We'll show you how to party. We'll show you how to dance. We'll show you how to eat and all that. Those things are all great, but me now that because Pahalu, as you're telling me, all these these luxury thoughts of me being in Hawaii, just getting photos of my family's memories. Also, that is beautiful. It just I never really thought about actually stepping back to actually fully take that in what the culture and philosophy of actual Hawaii, each native in that city was. I never actually once thought about it. Even for me and my wife, as we were actually we're actually supposed to travel to Hawaii after just about LA. We just came back today, but because we were the reason why we didn't go because my wife's friend actually just got COVID on the way back. But I'm not trying to talk about negativity here, but because so many people are going to Hawaii because a lot of people are showing interest this past couple of months because they don't allow any vaccination or any check, which I get it because that is a more open land compared to Los Angeles or New York City. But it's just for me it's like wow, I was kind of I'm sure my reason of just taking my family, spending the vacation and leisure time, that could be kind of stupefying for a lot of people. It could be a little bit more. I could have thought a little bit more in the sense of actually knowing the culture, teaching my daughter what history is all about, what the actual Native people, what they live with, just experience their life. So it's just for me. I do kind of feel guilty. Please do forgive me, because I fell into one of those people living in America, dream about going to Hawaii just for a leisure purpose, taking Instagram photos and take great great food and all that. But it just for me it was kind of another epiphany moment. It's like wow, I still have a long way to go. You know what I mean? But Jason really brought a great moment of just it's truly just even for a moment to think about the food culture, how we are brought up, the why we are the way we are, even respecting every little thing that we do. There has to be a reason why we are the way we are, whether it be Asian Americans, even those folks growing up in Hawaii, just so many other cultures. So it just, I think, it's just if you're kind of mindful and just internally think about reason the way we are, rather than easily, okay, why you guys are the way you are, So it just, for me as a father raising my daughter, once again, it just allowed me to question myself how to properly educate and teach children, new generation, so on and so forth.
Oh, thank you so much for that, John. That's great, and thanks for your honesty. And Jason, you mentioned something like I love that you said so much of the conversations around appropriation centers around the appropriator because it's like centered around this topic of like the fear of being canceled. I'm interested in Kanoi's and V's reactions to that. Kamaka, would love your input on that too.
First, I want to just express too, John, don't ever feel guilty for reflecting, for hearing, for learning, for wanting, for receiving. You cannot. The fact that you have the ability and the empathy and the understanding to do so is what we want. That's exactly what we desire.
Be more like John, people.
Yeah, I mean, so this is so as a person who's always been against bringing ferries to Molokai because we don't have ferries because of the impact that it can do to our islands and tourism. Our motto here is visit, spend, and then go home. And it behooves some of my own community members that I've been a part of on this island for a very long time when I enter spaces that have to deal with tourism. So I also will work with the county on tourism. I will work with HTA, which is Hawaii Tourism Authority, on tourism. And people who don't understand me will be like, well, why is she doing that? Well, the reason why is if there's not a voice in the space where people are trying to create tourism that has a voice for the people to say, no, that's not what we want, you're really just going in there to, you're pretty much, it's under duress. You have to go because nobody else is going to be in there. And you fight from the inside. And the idea of creating educated visitors is more important and precious to us than creating tourists, right? Because at the end of the day, we just want to connect. And we want to meet new people. It's not, we want to connect. We're about ohana. But see, our ohana and our aloha cannot be taken for granted. Once the boundaries are crossed, you have to recognize we have to put a stop to it. And that's us just making sure that we're protecting our space. Mm-hmm. But if at the end of the day, we want to embrace, and that about the person who appropriates, again, most times they don't even know it. They don't. Majority of the time, they don't. And it's not that they don't care. They actually do. They just don't know how to care for us. And so the more we talk about these things, the more we have a voice in certain spaces that are creating these spaces for those people to come in, we can tell them exactly how we want to be treated. And then the idea of worrying, am I stepping on somebody's foot? Am I crossing a line and living in this fear of like, oh my gosh, I want to, but I don't want to. I'm scared because I don't know what to say. That fear, that line slowly starts to dissolve, and we get back to square one. And so it's like you said, Jason, right? It's the idea of the evolution is not in a sense of shifting everything of the past, our foundation. All it is we're making that foundation appropriate for today. And that's what it comes down to. And today our mindsets are different. Today we forgot even ourselves. And so this is where we just got to remember and then share. So, it's not always their fault. It's not always my fault that I don't know either.
Right.
But I'm going to learn. And we want everybody to.
Real quick, I love that you said that. It's not my fault, right? Because I think when we use passive words like invisible or forgotten, we can forget that it was an active act of erasure, right? It was U.S. military and schools erasing Hawaiian history. It was U.S. curriculum decisions erasing Black and Native and Latinx and Asian history. And I love that point that you made, that this has happened even internal within us. And I'd even put it out there, just because somebody's of a particular ethnic or racial group doesn't mean we're not also, there's ways of relating appropriatively to our own history, our embodied history, if we have not been trained and mentored and brought into community by elders. Right? Because totally all the time I see Asians perpetuating Orientalist stereotypes about our own cultures because there has been this active removal and erasure. And I love that you pointed that out.
So true. Also, by the way, audience, you're not going crazy. There is a rooster in the background. All right. So moving on to, we've talked about appropriation. I know a lot of people are curious about appreciation. So sometimes elements of one culture can be very cathartic in another, in ways that someone else's culture cannot. I read this article about yoga and rock music, for example. Yoga was really cathartic and had a really great, it was kind of this way to spiritually connect back during a time of very high commercialism, industrialism, it took off in the US, right? Rock was an individualistic creative outlet for a lot of Asian countries like Korea, Japan. How can people explore other cultures to find meaning in their own lives, but not decenter the people of those cultures?
Can I go?
So,
Yes.
For me, I grew up in the Midwest. My father was military, so I pretty much grew up all over the world. When I was 13, I moved to Kentucky. I've been here pretty much since I was 13. The majority of my friends are Black. So before I knew anything about Hawaiian history or started to delve into my own community, I learned everything about Black history that I possibly could. And if it wasn't for my friendships that I cultivated with the Black community, I don't think I would have even ever thought about digging into, you know, Kanaka history. I'm like Kanoi. I'm also, you know, mixed. I'm Hawaiian and Portuguese, Okinawan, or Portuguese. If you don't know what Portuguese is, it's Portuguese. And so, yeah, like for me, I appreciate the Black community because that is all I ever knew until 2014. Yeah, my parents, we grew up pretty authentically Hawaiian. You know, pidgin was still spoken in the household. My mom cooked local kind foods, you know, and so all of that was very much a part of me. But for the majority of my life, I had an identity crisis for the most part, especially because I lived away from home. So I was part of the diaspora, you know. And so where did I find the community? It was in Black culture and with the Black community. And like Moana said at the beginning of the podcast, or the beginning of this panel, was, you know, you learn how to, I was going somewhere with this, I totally just lost my thought. But yeah, if it wasn't for the Black community and how they loved me and how I am appreciated and how I appreciate that community, I don't think that I would be able to answer this question appropriately, if that makes sense. Just because I know what that feels like to have a community love you and appreciate you that you don't even come from. And so I gained all of that in learning that, oh, here's what I was going to say. Moana had said that, you know, a lot of people don't know that the Black community and the Kanaka community are closely connected. And so that's what I learned through rediscovering what it meant to be Hawaiian to me. And like just listening to Kanoi's introduction, I'm like, oh, we definitely have to connect afterwards, especially because of the work that she does. And so, yeah, I say all that to say the fascination of who we are, because so many people are fascinated with us. They don't know how to appreciate us or love us or connect with us or show sincerity to who we are as a people, because like we've said on this panel, is it's not that they don't, it's just we don't know how. They don't know how, because even for Kanaka, like there's so many Kanaka that don't even know our own history, you know, and it's sad, but that's just the reality of it. And so just being part of different communities who accept us and love us makes me realize that I can also be an advocate for my community as well as another community. Sorry, I went on a tangent there.
No, I love it. Kanoi?
Oh, okay. That was great. No, that was great. And I totally can relate with you, V, and of course, Kanoi. You know, because obviously, you know, I mean, when I speak is one thing, and then my image is another. So I definitely had these moments of, you know, like an identity crisis, because, you know, I never know really where I fit in. And although I had a family that has loved and embraced me and taught me everything that they could, you know, there comes that point where in your life, you got to be like, okay, well, you got to take all those teachings and you kind of got to go out there on your own and figure out how you're going to navigate through the world. Yeah. It starts with the ohana, it starts with the piko, and then it goes to the kaiaulu, yeah, the community, and then it goes out to the honua, to the world. So it's like you said, you know, through this appreciation, like we said, I've gained the appreciation from the Hawaiian culture to be able to connect with both African American culture. I mean, it's pushed me even to, you know, find out my heritage. And so, you know, I'm just simply a product of my environment, and this is all I know for now. But we gotta, this is one of my beliefs is that, and it becomes a kuleana. When you learn about this particular culture, it becomes that responsibility for yourself to teach it. And I joke all the time, as being an entertainer, we think we're comedians too. So when I'm talking about, the lays, especially this month, it's May Day, Lay Day in Hawaii, and this is, if you've been waiting to get laid, well, here's your chance, I don't just leave it there. I have to talk about what the significance of the lei is, and why, where this particular pua or flower comes from, and how we honor the aina. The aina has been here for longer than we have, yeah. So it's very important for us to follow up with, and at least for me anyway, to follow up with what we learn and to teach correctly. Oh, mahalo.
Yeah, I just wanted to share also that I think V or Poahi, she shared it very clearly. Like, part of it is understanding who you are, even as you get into other people's, you talked about music, you talked about rap, you talked about hip hop, you talked about even yoga, I think getting into another culture or something that maybe is not of your culture, I think one of the greatest gift that you can give yourself is knowing also your own. So a lot of the times when I go out and I do workshops, I always end up in those workshops where everybody's a lomi lomi, the Hawaiian massage practitioner. And I'm going, oh, okay, not one person is Hawaiian, not one person has lived in Hawaii, not one person has even can call their genealogy of their lomi teachers beyond them. And I'm like, okay, well, and I asked, so why do you do this? Because I want to know, what is your reason? What's your intent? Well, it's healing. It heals me. I like the feeling, and I don't want to heal others. And I'm like, okay, great. So the first thing I usually do is say, hey, let's try this. Can you recite your mo'okuauhou? Can you recite your genealogy for me? Most times they can't. So I said, okay, that's fine. What we're going to do is we're going to use this time for us to figure out who you are. Because guess what? It's likely you are some type of healer. But guess what? You might even be a healer of, this, your I can't think of a culture right now. Another country, you're that. And they have healers and they're called this, and maybe it's similar to this, and you're tapping into those roots that you have ancestral memory of, but you cannot identify, but it's so yearning, it's in you. Oh. But because this is so close and so prominent, it makes sense. That's fine. But let's take some, let's dig a little deeper. A lot of the times they don't have the appropriate training, meaning, you can pay for the kit online and, do the workshops. But, Kamaka Kehao is actually a really great example that I honestly, Kamaka, sorry, I hate to say this, but I use an example, you and Kahua Laulani and some other people who even Tangaro, like the idea of being able to talk about our history and our culture, but having been raised in it, Hanai in it. It almost wasn't your choice, as it isn't our choice either. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't, oh, I felt good and it was drawn to me and this is where I feel good. And every time I'm here, I feel this beautifulness around me. No, Kamaka Kehao never have choice. And I'm pretty sure Kamaka Kehao can back me up on this, but I'm sure he's gone through a lot of sacrifices in times where he just did not want to. But encouraged to get up and keep going. We don't have choices. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So I will leave it. I will let Kamaka continue if you want to continue that one. But thank you for being you, Kamaka Kehao.
You're so right, and I mahalo that. And it really, it's what I've learned is it's not I'm just the body, and the spirit, if you will. But again, I refer back to that kuleana. You know, you understand or you learn so much about where you come from, and you cannot help. But I mean, you have the choice. I had the choice because I could have very well been very ku'e to it because I don't look like that person, and I don't want to be the catalyst for, you know, like the Black person or the Hawaiian person, you know what I mean? But from Hanai time, which is, you know, for us, it's more than just the paperwork, and that's, you know, where I know that, you know, Kanoi understands is it's about you know, you coming into this family, and it's like your blood, you know. So to that sense, absolutely, I had no choice, and you know, the story really is my mother's. It's my mother's story because she couldn't have children naturally, but it was just her heart's desire to give. That is what is just so magical, because when you receive so much love, you cannot help but return it. So, oh, okay.
Oh, look at you go with it. You're making me cry over here. Oh, you guys are so full of wisdom and insight. I'm loving this so far. My next question is for Jason. Jason, you spoke on this topic at the Music of Asian America Research Center, and I love that you break down appreciation into 4 stages. And beyond appreciation for you is apprenticeship. Can you elaborate on that? Can you talk more about that and how it's related to your journey in hip hop?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Yeah, everybody who's interested in these topics should definitely check out the Music of Asian America Research Center based in Philadelphia, MAARC. They do a lot of great work. But yeah, for me, I think that, and this is great because exactly what Kamaka Kehal just was talking about in terms of literal or figurative or spiritual adoption, right? I think if you love something, if you're so I am not, as everybody said, I'm not opposed to people who are interested in tourism, because often that's the only thing they know, cultural tourism, right? They don't have an inroad. They don't have somebody who can teach them hip hop or kung fu or, you know, whatever, yoga. So we all start out as tourists, you know, when there's something that's interesting, we think it's cool. But I think that exposure to a culture without relationship with the people within that culture is always going to be capped at a certain level, right? At a certain point, you can't go deeper. You can't learn more without building relationships. Now you can, and that becomes appropriation, right? You can, and that becomes fantasy. You're not actually relating to a culture. You're relating to your imagination of what this culture can be for you. And that's when it becomes poisonous, because you're not actually talking to that culture at all. You're not actually learning from that culture. You're creating an imagination of it, and then you're learning from your fantasy. And so in that lecture, and it's a workshop I've given sometimes, I talk about these stages of appreciation, going from a complete outsider to an insider to a creator. But so much of that is, like you said, tied to what I call apprenticeship. So there's appropriation, there's appreciation, and to me, the sort of highest level is apprenticeship, which is when you're at such a level within the community and in the culture that people from within that culture are relating to you, and you're learning and you're listening and you're being mentored into it, to the point where you're actually participating in the culture, even though you didn't start in that culture. You know, hip hop, one of our slogans from Jump has always been, it's not where you're from, it's where you're at. Right? And you can come from anywhere into the culture, but if you're in the culture, you have to be in the culture. You dig what I'm saying? And I think that that's something that I'm hearing from everyone here, which is, you know, whether it's friendships with Black friends, whether it's, you know, and frankly, again, you know, if I'm a Chinese dude who's practicing Kung Fu and I'm just learning it from movies and I'm learning it from internet tutorials, I'm not actually practicing Kung Fu, regardless of whatever my ethno-racial phenotype and heritage is. And I think that that's something that's so important to point out in this information age, is that information is not everything. Relationships plus information build the world. Information on its own creates horrible tragedies, because that's when you get, incredible inequity. And I always, one thing, and I'll end with this. One thing I hear a lot, right, is people saying, oh, education is so important. If we just educate people better, then, the world will be kinder. And I think that education, knowledge, is necessary but insufficient, right? Because straight up, the more you learn about a culture, the better you can exploit it also, right? There's so many examples of American military imperialism where they went and they studied native cultures, they studied Asian cultures, they studied whatever cultures, and then they used that to expand American military hegemony. And it's not sufficient to have information and knowledge. What's important is having loving relationships, real relationships, bilateral relationships with a community. Then you can actually move beyond taking and move towards. And I think, and this is going to really be the last thing. The last thing is, to anybody who's listening who wants to move cross-culturally or learn cross-culturally, the goal is not for you to be like a sidelined spectator. The goal is for you to bring something to the culture. Right? Like, we don't like as an Asian dude, I don't want, like black folks and white folks and native and, I don't want people just being like, oh, that's nice, and holding us at an arm's length. I want you to bring something to the culture. But the question again is, are you bringing something to the culture? Or are you bringing something to you? And I think that really changes everything.
Such a good point. I love that. We're reaching the end, but everything is a remix, right? Like, a lot of us are creative in different ways. And creatives know that our art is usually an amalgam of different influences. And now in this day and age, you can have influences from all over the world, right? So in 2017, a white Canadian artist was inspired by studying the Anishinaabe painting. And so she tried to open up a solo show. It was canceled because a lot of Indigenous groups were saying that she was stealing and culturally appropriating the style of painting. Unfortunately, I don't really have much more information beyond that. But what are your thoughts on inspiration and appropriation in artistic expression?
I think it goes back to what Jason was just saying in terms of, like, do you have a relationship with the culture?
Right.
Are you invested into the culture, right? Like, and it's because culture kind of insinuates community. So that means it's not just about you and what you're trying to take from it. It's about your contributions to it as well, driving, Jason's point home. Yeah.
I love that. That's so great. And then finally, I selfishly want to know, I know John's mentioned this, I know a lot of people on Instagram and Twitter were wanting me to ask this, but what's a non-sucky way to visit Hawaii?
I would say number one, send an email to moananuipodcast@gmail.com. Seek us out. Like, perhaps we can have a panel on, like, in more depth on how to come and visit Hawaii with respect, like learning a little bit about our people, actually seeking out the local community, right? Don't stay in the resorts and be like, oh, I'm going to be over here. Like, why are you going to come to our island and just sit in your hotel? You can do that anywhere, right? Like, come into the local communities, come with respect, right? Don't come with that. I've traveled overseas, right? And so a lot of things that I've heard from other people in other countries is Americans have an arrogance to us when we're in other places. We expect that the way our lifestyle is at home is how we can go no matter where we are in the world, right? And that's not how you come. Like, the whole saying, do in Rome as the Romans do, or whatever that is, right? But, like, understand that you're walking into a foreign environment and adjust your perspective as such. Come with respect, understanding that this is no longer the place and the environment of which you are familiar, and not tread lightly, but walk lightly, walk with respect, and walk with an attitude of what can I take away from this experience, wherever it is that you might be.
Yeah. And if I may just add on that too, you know, a lot of people often always do the, well, you know, you are part of, you're part of the, you know, the United States. But rather than the label, learn again, like the people, learn about the people, because the attitude and the mannerisms are a whole different thing. Even when you go to, you know, I travel to Japan, you know, a lot, you know, that's, I have to learn their ways. I cannot be over there and think I know it all. So mahalo for that, Moana.
I'll back that up. Come observing. Observation is always great to do first. All senses, and be open. Be open to embrace, to learn, to receive, to understand. Those are all the things that we would want for us to do ourselves in somebody else's home when we enter it, as we would want for somebody else to walk into our home when they enter. That it's not like everywhere else. It's not like what you see in the pamphlets. We're people. And we have feelings. And we're very protective. But yes, come observing and open, because guess what? Sometimes when you're open enough, just enough, and humble enough, you will be served more than you could ever imagine. That's just how our people are. But yeah, so that's backing up their mana'o, or their thoughts.
Lee, do you have any? Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say, can I add one more thing? Because this is something that I hear. I have heard sentiments that, like, people from Hawaii are racist, or, and this is usually from a Caucasian perspective, right? Like, you know, they treat us horribly, right? So this is back to the point of, like, where you have to understand our history and our experiences of people who look like you and who have come with an attitude of entitlement. We do not respond well to that. So as long as you, once again, come with respect, the aloha spirit is real, and it's not just the word aloha. Like, as Kanoe said, if you come correctly, you will be served in, like, this is why people love Hawaii, because our people, this is natural for us. But we're protective because we have been exploited and we continue to be exploited. So yeah, I always, like, my hackles come up when people say, oh, you know, Hawaiians are this or Hawaiians are that. I'm like, okay, how did you approach them though? Because that's the thing. Like, did you come over there thinking you know everything, or did you come and just saying, oh, hello, aloha, you know, how are you, you know, can you help me learn about what it is to be here? Or did you come in and be like, oh, you know, I go get my bag, and, you know, like, whatever, that Hawaiian over there, they're so lazy, you know, like, those kinds of things come like that. And I'm just, yeah, you will not see the good side of us.
That's a great point.
And keep having these conversations. Yeah.
Yes.
So you guys are gonna be saying this again at the end, but I really employ that is, you know, how can you get involved? Talk about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
No, thank you all so much. Like, I think all of you raised really powerful points. To summarize, sounds like, you know, to appreciate, you gotta bring something. You can't just, like, watch by the sidelines, right? And also, what I heard was pay attention to the source of what you're reading and consuming. Build relationships. There's going to be a wall where you can't really learn further without building those relationships. And also, don't censor yourself or your fear of cancellation when it comes to these conversations. Thank you all so much. I wish I could, like, go on for a couple more hours. There's still so many questions. But for people who want to learn more and want to reach out to you directly, how can they get in touch? I'll start with Moana.
Well, you guys are here right now, but the best way to stay in touch is to continue to follow the Moana Nui podcast on YouTube, on Twitch, on Facebook, And we also have our audio recordings on all podcast platforms, so you can listen as you commute or do chores around the house. That's the best way to stay in touch and help us continue to have these conversations and learn from the wonderful people who are brave enough to come and share their voices.
John, how about you? Where can we find you?
Well, for the most part, I forgot to mention I'm a stay-home dad, but my wife just graduated, so time will allow me to have more time to actually link up with a lot more people, including these beautiful individuals here, including Dana. Facebook, Instagram, John Ham, D John Ham. You guys are able to find through Moana because she's like the center core to this beautiful movement. But I mean, once again, just allow me to, just given the fact that I flew in 3 hours ago, for me to link up with this, just amazing individuals, just for me to have an amazing experience, to just be heard, our souls be connected, and I truly respect that. There we go. Moana, thank you for linking my, social media. But once again, Havana, thank you too as well. It's just been amazing questions, and then for you to, smoothly, lead this, panel. So.
Kamaka Kihau?
Yeah, mahalo Havana. Havana. That's important. Knowing people's name. Mahalo. So, Moana, everybody, it's been a pleasure. KKF_music for Instagram. And then kamakakihau.com for my website. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. V, where can we find you? You're on mute.
Just kidding. Sorry. Okay. On Twitter, I am at Powahi Souza, exactly how it's spelled on the screen. Also, my Facebook is a little bit more private, but still it's at Powahi Souza. I am also www.thepolynesianresistor.com.
Okay, that's a cool name. Jason.
Yeah, so everybody can find me at Jason Chu, CHU Music, everywhere on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud. Also, my album Face Value just dropped last week with Alan Z. Thank you, folks. Thank you so much. If you want to check that out, you can go to facevalue.world to learn more about Asian American history and the project, or just search for Jason Chu on any streaming service.
Wonderful. And Kanoy.
Mahalo, everybody. Mahalo. My name is Kanoy Lani Davis. You can find me on Instagram at Pomahina Designs, as well as at Monabombs LLC. And we are also on all your streaming podcasts areas. I don't know, whatever the word is. My brain is like slowly dying out right now.
Okay.
You can find us everywhere, just look for Monabombs podcast. And I think that's it. Thank you.
I love it.
That was real.
Well, you know what? I'm going to blame it on the brain power of this discussion and the knowledge and truth bombs you dropped. All right. Well, thank you once again, for all the wonderful speakers. Please find them on Instagram, social media. Ask them, reach out to them. Again, build relationships. That's the best way to learn and appreciate these cultures. Thank you again to Dana and Moana for having us on, and we will catch you next time. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.